It is high time I had a look at the 1.2 update for EU4's Post Finem mod. If you don't know what Post Finem is about, it is basically an alternate history in which Carthage won the Punic Wars and the Roman Empire never became dominant around the Mediterranean. The 1.2 update, however, focuses on an entirely different part of the world, the Arabian Peninsula, the Horn of Africa, and southern India. Today I am going to be playing a nation with a rather challenging start, Simylla. Simylla is basically a remnant of the Hellenic peoples left over in the south of India after the conquests of Alexander the Great. In this series, I intend to turn what is essentially a city-state into an expansionist, continent-spanning Indo-Greek empire. If you enjoy this type of content and would like to see more, including a part 2 of this video, be sure to leave a like, a comment and subscribe to the channel. As with any EU4 game, we are going to start by doing the estates. Simylla actually starts with 40% crown land instead of the usual 30, so we can do a little bit more than usual. On this occasion, I gave the clergy religious state, development of temples, clerical education and right of donations. Right of donations cuts missionary costs by 50%, and that is going to be very useful considering that we own the only Hellenic province in India, meaning we're gonna need to convert loads of provinces. For the nobility, I went with primacy of the nobility, increased levies and supremacy over the crown. Then finally for the burghers or Vaishyas, I went for indebted to the Vaishyas for a whopping 25 ducats in loans, patronage of the arts for the prestige and private trade fleets because we start with a nice amount of trade boats. It was then time to put those private trade fleets to work in Gujarat and select our rivals. Our only enemy was Goa, so I rivaled them as well as Marathas to the north and Bijapur to the south. Next step, allies. As the only Hellenic nation in India, there are not gonna be many people who like us, but Golconda over here was pretty close, and we also had the shared rival of Marathas. So I went ahead and started improving relations with Golconda, scornfully insulted Marathas, and then I immediately hired the Free Company. I also recruited a general with which I got relatively lucky, and an admiral that was not as good. Then it was time to unpause the game. You can consider the following steps as a kind of guide, although of course later on the game will evolve in ways that are hard to replicate as the AI starts making decisions of its own. Simylla only starts with 7 force limits, so it is always going to be a rough start. The 12th of December is a very pivotal date, as by then you will be able to send an alliance request to Golconda, and on that very same day you should be able to declare on Bijapur. You can declare this early because recruiting the Free Company will allow you to complete the Cassandra's Men mission, which will give you permanent claims on their lands. I actually messed this up and forgot to click the mission before the 12th, so I could not declare until the 13th. Also, don't forget to check Bijapur's diplomatic feedback and set any provinces that are not red on their map as vital interest for yourself. In this run, Bijapur had allied Telangana, but in my test run they had allied Mysuru, which is a considerably stronger opponent, but it also offers a bigger financial reward if you win and are able to take their money and war reparations. Either way, they're gonna have different allies every time, but no matter which one they have, it is now time for war. So go ahead and promise land to Golconda so they will join and call them into the war. Early on, it is very important that you help with Golconda in any battles they may face. If they get their army wiped out, you may find yourself on the losing side of this war. So do not worry too much about occupying provinces yet. Especially because if you have correctly set your provinces of vital interest, the correct occupations will go to you even if Golconda ends up being the one to siege them. Another tricky thing about this war is that the Free Company, which makes up about half your forces, will have very low morale in the first couple of months. In my case, I did get lucky with the fact that Golconda had an amazing general. This resulted in a swift stack wipe of the Bijapur army, after which I decided to carpet siege the rest of Bijapur, meaning we only had to deal with their ally Telangana's army from now on. I got even more lucky when I got a 345 heir called Menander and started marching into the lands of Telangana soon thereafter. The only real issue with Telangana was that they had a level 3 fort on their capital, and I only had 9,000 men. It's technically enough, but every time you have a little bit of attrition, the siege stalls. So I decided to just wait on the province of Devarakonda over here and loot it dry. In the meantime, my ally was sieging down the capital of Bijapur. At this point, I also started fabricating a claim on Goa to our south, as that claim was not included in the permanent ones we got from our mission tree. By December of 1445, I had looted Devarakonda dry, and just a moment later my allies completed their siege of Bijapur. Together, Golconda and I finished off Telangana, and I decided to siege down their capital all the way, despite the fact that Bijapur had already unconditionally surrendered. Also, sometime during that siege, I grabbed my claim on Goa. I also got this very nice event that reduced my war exhaustion by 2, and that was very nice because by the time the Telangana siege was actually finished in April of 1447, I had built up 3.5 war exhaustion despite getting this event earlier. I took money and war reparations from Telangana, and Bijapur was divided up between myself and Golconda. I then concentrated development from the state of Desh, bringing more development into my capital state, and started coring my new provinces for cheaper also, because the new provinces were now cheaper to core. At this point, it is very important that you do not delete the Free Company. Go ahead and reduce autonomy in Dabol and Rajapur, the 2 provinces you just conquered that are part of your capital state. And if you really want to min-max, which is what typical EU4 players usually want to do, especially in single player, you have to make sure that rebels never occupy any province so that you don't get any extra years of separatism or any extra autonomy. Extra separatism will hinder you from completing the Revive Yavanna identity mission as soon as possible. This is because you cannot culture convert provinces with any amount of separatism, and all your provinces besides your capital are going to have separatism. Once your troops and the Free Company return home, you should seize land and make sure that you deal with any rebels that might spawn right away before they siege anything down. After that, it is time to put your own troops to drilling and make your Free Company suppress rebels to postpone any further uprisings for as long as possible. Note that once any rebel faction reaches about 80%, you should probably stop drilling so you're at full morale once they spawn. Rebels usually spawn in the highest dev province they are eligible to spawn in, so pay extra attention to those provinces. Besides that, at this point you should start working on your fleet in order to complete the Restore the Forlorn Fleet mission. Unrest in provinces heavily affects the speed at which you are able to produce regiments and ships. Therefore, the Free Company suppressing rebels in your capital state should help you produce trade boats more quickly. Again, now is the time to produce those extra trade boats so you can complete that Restore the Forlorn Fleet mission. In general, in Post Finem, aggressive expansion is more severe and exaggerated than in vanilla. This decision was made by the developers because there are way more different culture groups in Post Finem than there are in vanilla, and this would basically allow you to expand in different culture groups at the same time, and then only have very small coalitions in each culture group as you kind of take turns taking bites out of culture groups, basically. Anyway, especially in multiplayer, this would be really bad. So yeah, as you can see, the result of this is that our conquest of just 4 provinces gave us significant aggressive expansion all across India. Therefore, the next step in our campaign is to sit tight, work on our economy by building trade boats and buildings if we can. And we're just waiting for AE to tick down a bit so we can commit to another conquest without the entire subcontinent turning against us. Also, don't forget to pay off those burger loans that you took earlier, since you can now replace them by new burger loans that are worth 20 ducats each instead of 5 each. And you should have a positive balance at this point as well. At this point, in my case, I waited a good long while for aggressive expansion to tick down and to deal with all the rebel factions in my country. In the meantime, I also fabricated more claims on Gujarat to my north and built trade ships whenever I had the funds to do so. It is also good to recognize that at this point our starting army and the Free Company combined still put us over our force limit. So if you can hire a level 1 military advisor that gives you force limit, that guy will be practically free, cost you like 0.2 ducats. Unfortunately, I was not so lucky in this particular run, but I was in my test run. By October of 1448, my Maratha separatists had ticked up to 80%, so I decided to stop drilling my main army so I could destroy these rebels as soon as they spawned. Now, as I mentioned before, rebels tend to spawn in the higher dev provinces, so the most likely target here was Dabur, or Dabol. I wrote two things down in my script, I don't know which one it is. Anyway, that's where I decided to park my army. By May 1449, I had to pick a new rival, so I picked Gujarat, and by August 1449, these rebels that I'm waiting for still had not spawned. But by now, my force limit had caught up with my troop count due to the autonomy in my lands getting lower and lower over time. The rebels finally did spawn in September of 1449, and by the grace of a terrain bonus and some good rolls, I was able to defeat them. After that, I returned my armies to the capital, sent out my brand new trade boat that I had just finished, and started drilling my main army, while keeping the Free Company around for future endeavors. By December of 1449, I was able to take military technology and gain innovativeness, despite the fact that I never actually focused on military points. At this point, it turned into a bit of a waiting game, as my AE was still very high with slightly too many of the surrounding nations. By March of 1550, all my cores finished, so I decided to state the state of Desh and immediately reduce autonomy there as well. Now, reducing autonomy here will reset the counter on the rebels, so in your situation you may not want to do it, but I did it. So the result is that we will have to fight another round of Maratha separatists soon, but I think it is well worth it for the increased income, manpower and force limit we gain from it. At this point, I got a little bit lucky again, and I noticed that Goa was at war with a bunch of nations up north. My plan immediately became to exploit this such that I could fight Goa without any allies. I made sure not to give military access to anyone involved in that war, so they wouldn't siege down Goa before me, and as we approached the end of 1450, I stopped drilling, built up my morale, and went in on Goa. The only ally Goa had at this point was the tiny nation of Rewakanta, and they were only their ally because they were in their Goa Trade League. So yeah, I declared this Goa war in October of 1450, and yes, I did call in my ally Golconda to help me deal with their small green ally up north. After a quick stack wipe, I found myself sieging down Goa with nothing but the Free Company, while my ally headed north with 9,000 troops. I literally just sat on the siege for a good while, and by April 1451, Gujarat decided to jump in on my target's only ally, Rewakanta. In June 1451, I finished building all the trade boats that I needed to complete the Forlorn Fleet, only to realize that the final boat I built was actually a galley instead of a trade boat. So yeah, I just went ahead and deleted that galley to replace it with a trade boat. Then, in September 1451, Keladi to my south declared war on Goa as well. Now, this was a very nice opportunity, and I decided that it might be a good idea to vassalize Goa instead of annexing them, so I could fight a defensive war against Keladi and take money, war reparations, and trade power from them. Before I could do that though, I would have to march north to Rewakanta to force them out of the war, because otherwise Goa was not going to accept vassalization. Whole thing, or so I thought, until Goa just unconditionally surrendered a couple months later. So it was that I vassalized Goa and ended up in another war. Luckily, being ahead in military technology is always a great help when you're at war, and by early 1452 I was beginning to siege down Keladi. By August 1452, I realized I forgot to click the Forlorn Fleet mission earlier, and by the time 1453 swung around, Keladi was 100% occupied, and I realized I could take another 3 provinces of them without triggering too much of a coalition. So I went ahead and did that, and then it was just a matter of concentrating development, coring all those lands up, and getting my troops back to my heartland to deal with the latest wave of Maratha separatists. I could also seize land again, so I did that. In early 1454, I was able to build my first building, a church, in my capital, and by August of that year, I reached level 4 in all technology groups. With that, I had wrestled myself out of Simylla's challenging starting position as a one-province minor city-state. Simylla is now a regional power in southwestern India and set up for further conquests. If you would like to see said conquests, be sure to engage with this video as much as possible. These types of videos take a long time for me to make, so I will only upload a part 2 if I see that there is enough interest in part 1. Thank you so much for watching, like, subscribe, and see you in the next one, hopefully. Peace out.